Okay, psychology is common sense. You know, it's very interesting because it always starts with the idea people think psychology is easy. As I mentioned, you know, one of the ideas people have is that, oh, you cannot get into medical school, so second best thing is to go to psychology. Because psychology is easy. You know, medical school's hard, psychology is easy. So because the way that people look at psychology is they say it's about human beings. How hard can that be? Because we're all human beings. We all have our own personal experiences, and therefore anybody can be a psychologist, you know, because we're all experts on human behavior, because that's what we do. We're all humans. But this is not necessarily true, because psychology involves a lot more than just, again, understanding basic human behavior. Yes, it's about communicating with people. It is about understanding human behavior, but there's also a science background to it. Meaning, like as I said, one of the things that we do is we observe people in order for us to achieve a hypothesis or derive a hypothesis. So we are trying to look at the questions that we have in mind, create a hypothesis, and these presumptions or hypotheses that we have about human behaviors, we then test them scientifically. Because right now the field of psychology is moving towards this evidence-based practice. So everything that we do must have evidence, must have some sort of basis, a scientific background for us to be able to understand. So it's not just about saying that, you know, for example, a common misconception that people say is that in relationships, opposites attract. You're attracted to someone who's the opposite of who you are. But what we have found actually in research, this is not true. And yet people still say this, people still believe in it, and people always say, yes, you should find someone who's the opposite of you so that you complement, like the yin and yang kind of theory. But it's not true. Actually, it's similarities. People are attracted, or people, based on research, we find that, you know, you tend to find people who are similar to you in a lot of ways, because that similarity is what pulls you towards the person. All right. So psychology does depend on the scientific method. Yeah, so when we look at a science, what makes something a science? It is the use of scientific principles and scientific methods. Yeah, we have a hypothesis, we generate hypothesis. Based on the hypothesis, we then find methodology to test the hypothesis. And once we are able to test the hypothesis, we run the data analysis, and we are able to, you know, to spread the information based on the data. So we do have something that is very much empirical. Yes. Okay, psychology, yes, and that's why students who often come into psychology thinking that it is, you know, their second option because they cannot get into the main major of whichever field that they want to go into, and they feel like they come into human science and they just want to do something that is fun. They take psychology, can be sidetracked when they get into the courses such as statistics, research methods, psychometrics. Yeah, because these are three of the core courses that we have. Anywhere around the world you take psychology, these are the courses that people require you to take. These are what we call basic core courses, and yet they can also be the more challenging courses. Yeah, so psychology is not just about common sense. It is about empirical methods. It is about manipulation of variables in order for us to find some objective measures. And we also, you know, want to be able to replicate results, so that to show that there is a continuity. And we are, you know, saying that research is important so that we can also predict future occurrences. Wow, I know. If it really was about money, you know, I would have made tons of money already. You know, but the thing, I'm not saying that with psychology degree you cannot make money. Okay, don't get me wrong. But the expectations that with a bachelor's degree you can go out there and get them, you know, a job as a therapist or as, you know, a counseling psychologist with a bachelor's degree is actually a myth. It is a misconception, because with a bachelor's degree in psychology, there's, you know, you cannot really call yourself a psychologist. Okay, because psychology is a very regulated field. In Malaysia at this point in time, you can only call yourself a psychologist after a master's degree. So with a master's degree in your specialization, which could be industrial and organizational, health psychology, clinical psychology, developmental psychology, all the applied psychology courses, you then can start calling yourself a psychologist. Okay, with a master's degree. With a bachelor's degree, you can call yourself, some places call themselves an assistant psychologist. In Malaysia, we do have a position for psychology officer. Okay, however, a psychology officer is a bachelor degree level whereby you do not have adequate training yet to do one-on-one work with therapy. Yes, so do we, as a psychologist, once you achieve that psychology level, meaning with a master's degree, is our role just to listen to people talk? Not necessarily, okay? Even therapy itself. Therapy is not just about people talking and venting, and then they feel good and leave you. Yeah, and then you, after 15 minutes, you're like, okay, what do I do next? Therapy actually is a very, it is an engagement between two people. So it is a process. It is about actively engaging the other party and using your active listening skills. You are also using assessments. Yeah, this is where the psychometric courses will be helpful, because you need to be able to assess your clients, especially to determine at what level they're at. And you also involve yourself with asking questions, because sometimes you have to challenge your client. So it's not just sitting there and listening, and after 50 minutes they leave happy. If only it was that easy, again, then everybody, anybody, yes, everybody would be happy. We wouldn't have problems in this world. However, it is a process. Therapy is a process. It is an engagement between two parties who is, willing to start making the changes. And it involves helping the client to also achieve a level of, problem solving. So it's about laying out all the different options, and the client or the person who comes to seek help will then have the ability to start making the choices for themselves. Yeah, so it's very active. Do we make money? Yes, definitely. You can make a salary. Is it a large sum of money? Depending on the amount of experience that you have. So the more experience that you have, more credibility. If you work with patients who are of high end, meaning that if you work with professionals, you are more likely to be able to, to charge higher. If you are a beginning, psychologist, say for example, you completed your master's and you are just starting out in business, I think if you charge too high, no one's going to come to you. Just like any other business. Okay, so it is a business in a way. So if you want to do individual practice, whether as an IO psychologist or as a clinical psychologist, a health psychologist, counselor psychologist, you have to think of it in the mindset of a business. Okay, so what would set the precedence is you start off with creating your niche area or your market, for people who want to come to see you. So if you're charging 300 ringgit for a master's holder, people are going to say, well, I can see the doctorate level psychologist for 180. Why would I go to a master's holder for 300 ringgit? It's a business deal. So you have to understand the market. Yeah. So again, with experience, with time, inshallah, the money will be there. But I think just give yourself time to build up your practice if you want to. So I'm not saying that you're going to be poor as a psychologist. Just like any other profession, inshallah, with hard work, with a proper, niyat that you come into this work doing halal work, inshallah, the money will be there. But just give yourself time and don't have expectations. Again, I think, Miza, we've talked about this all the time, so far. I think we've always led upon this. So expectations, expecting that you're going to get that $3,000, $4,000 job immediately after your bachelor's degree, have that cushy office, on your own private practice, and have people come in just like in the movies. Unfortunately, that's not quite true just yet.
It doesn't work that way.
Yes. Wow, yeah, this is a big one also. Psychology works with crazy people, and this comes along with that point where we talked about before. Some people feel that the people who go into psychology, it's because they themselves are crazy. Okay, so because of that, because we're crazy, we work with crazy people.
Yes.
All right. Now, going back to the two terms that you used earlier, okay, antisocial and psychopaths, two words that most often have been misused and misattributed. Okay, antisocial does not mean someone who is against socialization. Okay, antisocial is a personality attribute whereby the person does not like rules. So a person who likes to break the rules without feeling any sort of remorse. Okay, that's really the essence of antisocial. So when you break the law and yet you don't feel any guilt, for example, you may, hurt someone, for example, because you feel like that person hurt you first, so I have to hurt them back. You don't have any remorse. You have no idea about why it hurts the other person. All you feel that it's my duty to get back at that person because they hurt me. Okay, so that's sort of an antisocial trait. And when we talk about antisocial traits, it's in all of us. Yeah, everyone has some measure of it. It's just whether or not it is high or whether or not it's low. So I think this is where we have to be really aware of it. Now, the term psychopath, it's really an interesting word because people always say, okay, psychologists work with psychos. Okay, they like to shorten the word. The word psychology is not that long, I think. It's 3 syllables, right? Psychology, well, 4, sorry. So people have a need to shorten things for whatever reason. Psychopaths, again, is sort of like a criminal behavior. It's someone who gets in trouble with the law, again, who commits crimes with no remorse, but they don't necessarily have a mental disorder behind it. Okay, and so again, this leads to the issue of insanity defense. Yeah, because people always say that, okay, as a psychologist, one of the things that when people get away from committing a crime, they will plead insanity. Even in the United States, the insanity plea doesn't work at all. People think that it's easy to get off and claim that, oh, I killed that person and so I can plead the defense that I'm insane. But really, actually, the insanity plea doesn't really work. And research has shown that states in the United States, they don't really believe in the insanity plea. Okay, so it's not the way that we see it in, again, our Criminal Minds or whatever shows that we watch. Okay, now going back to the question, psychologists work with crazy people. Okay, what we do as a psychologist is one area of psychology, which is clinical psychology, which is my specialization. We work with people who have mental disorders. Okay, people who are mentally disordered are people who have either a chemical imbalance in the brain, okay, as a result of genetics, or it could be someone who has had the genetic vulnerability and experience high levels of stress. Therefore, they are developing certain disorders that impairs their ability to function. Okay, and so if we talk about mental disorders, asking people who are outside of the field of psychology, any layperson, people attribute that to, again, the word crazy. Or one person, this was a very interesting one person said to me, oh, when you talk about mental disorders, you're talking about something like mental retardation, right? Mental disorders is mental retardation. It's the same. Okay, so it doesn't really work that way. Yes, mental retardation is one particular disorder that could happen under this mental disorder, but it is not the same thing. Okay, and so another person would say that, well, when you have a mental disorder, it results from weakness of character. You're just not strong enough. That's why you have a mental illness. You got to toughen up. You got to stop being so weak. You got to stop feeling so bad for yourself. Get out of your depression. Again, if it was only that easy, we would not have people who suffer from clinical depression to the point that they would actually take their own lives. So the mental disorder really takes away the willpower. Okay, and this is where with, the teachings of Islam, alhamdulillah, if we go back to that and really work on ourselves and our relationship with Allah, it becomes a buffering factor for us. Okay, so do we work with crazy people? We don't work with crazy people. We work with people who are mentally ill, who have an illness. Again, people, doctors work with people who have diabetes. We accept that. Why cannot we accept that psychologists work with people who have a mental disorder, a mental illness? Yeah, it is the same. It's just that one is a physical illness that we can see the signs and symptoms versus a mental disorder where we don't necessarily see the signs and symptoms directly. and we don't see, but we see it in terms of the relationship, in terms of the interaction with other people.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, so I think that's the part that saddens me. You know, so rather than call people who have a disorder crazy or gila in Bahasa, you know, people always use this. You know, I hope that we build enough understanding that this is part of an illness and people do not choose to be the way that they are.
Yes, absolutely. People easily label people.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And we psychologists are not psychos. We just learn psychology. We study psychology and all the related terms and theories in it.
Absolutely. And I always go back to that. No matter how good of a psychologist you are, first, we're human beings first. Okay, regardless of anything, we're human beings first. So just like any other human being, we are as vulnerable as other people. However, we do have a protection level whereby we learn the techniques and the skills, but it doesn't mean it's that easy to apply in ourselves. Like I said, one of the easiest things is to see it in other people and say that, okay, you should start taking care of yourself. It's so easy to say that to other people, but do I practice self-care all the time? I have to tell you the truth. Sometimes I do forget, you know, but it is easy for me to tell people, okay, now you need to take a break, you know, go and get some rest, snap out of it a little bit, you know, get out of that, take a break, and then you can recharge yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I mean, not to say that we don't do criminal profiling. Okay. Yes, part of the work of a forensic, this is a field for forensic psychology. So this is, again, another branch of psychology, because as we know, psychology, there's so many diverse fields. Yeah. So one of it is forensic psychology. As a forensic psychologist, you will be able to do some elements of criminal profiling. But criminal profiling that we do as a psychologist is not like the CSIs and the Criminal Minds, whereby within 30 minutes you can get a whole profile of the person. You can really rough out where they come from, what happened to them, and this is the kind of behaviors. But rather, the profiling is, a lot of it is an art form. Yeah, there's still a lot of research areas that needs to be done to validate some of the techniques that we do. Yeah, and there is not enough evidence to support some of the techniques that we have to help with the profiling. So right now what we do, again, like I said, the main thing that we do is we do a very, you know, objective observation. That's what we need to do. The observation skills will be paramount for us to be able to determine. From the observational skills, we are then able to then generate an understanding of what is the pattern for the individuals. And then from there, we're able to create an understanding or a basic profile based on that. So we do observations. We would also do interviews with family members or people who are close to them to get as much information as we can. But just being able to do that within 30 minutes, it's not that way. So within 1 hour, we cannot solve a case. Okay, if only, again, as Miza said, if only it works that way, we would have solved a lot of our criminal cases. But unfortunately, this is, again, a process, and it takes time. It takes research. It takes a lot of effort from a group of people to work together. You know, it does take a toll sometimes, because it is tiring, especially, like I said, you know, as a clinical psychologist, people come and share things with you. And sometimes, like I said, we're human beings, so we can be affected. Yeah, if people say as psychologists, you're going to be that tough, hard person that nothing is going to affect you, I have to tell you that there are days that some of the cases that I do see becomes very personal to me. Okay, so if people say you have to separate everything, yes, it is a skill that we learn to be able to dissociate ourselves from our cases, but there are going to be some cases that becomes close to our heart, and this is where you start to process, why is this case a little bit different, and you sort of, you know, do muhasabah, you sort of understand yourself. Why am I so affected by this? Is it because I'm too tired? Sometimes when we're too tired, you know, we become a bit more emotional, and so things become a bit more personal. Okay, and then sometimes it's because it reminds you of a former, you know, your own personal experience. Like I said, sometimes I see, you know, my clients, and I'm like, wow, this reminds me of my own family. You know, so when you see that, you have to really understand where your limits are, and you have to separate yourself. So that is a skill that as a psychologist we also have to know, is to know ourselves. Again, know ourselves, know our limits.